Hi, everyone. Welcome to Around the Ladder. I'm Erika Steinberg, and this is the podcast about career paths that don't follow the usual script. We've all heard about climbing the corporate ladder, but careers often zigzag, they stall, they take unexpected turns. If your journey hasn't been a straight climb up, you're in the right place. I love the idea of going around the ladder and really finding a path that fits who you are. So in the show, I get to talk to people who have taken unconventional routes by choice or by chance, and also by my definition. It's kind of arbitrary. And they found success on their own terms. Today, I am very happy to welcome my friend Murray Coffey. Murray's career is a testament to his belief in human creativity. He served as a public defender in Chicago during the crack epidemic. He taught law to undergrad students in the arts and management fields, and he worked as a freelance writer covering the Midwest music scene. He was also an investigative reporter, and doing that, he exposed a pyramid scheme which led to a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against him, which thankfully was later dismissed when the scheme's leader was indicted. Murray also guided insurance carriers. He's advised tech startups in Chicago's Silicon Prairie, and he served as CMO for multiple law firms, which is how he and I met. For the past 3 years, he's run his own consultancy, helping law firms build and lead their marketing teams, even serving as interim CMO for a fast-growing New York firm. Now, he's senior strategic advisor to the Midwest chair at Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, which is an ML 100 firm. So when he's not working, Murray splits his time between Dallas and Chicago, still collecting music and enjoying life with his wife of 25 years and their two amazing and appropriately challenging adult children. My kids are not far behind, so we'll have lots of conversations about that as he goes on.
Right.
Yes. So, and full disclosure, Murray is who I call when I'm having a hard time and I realize that I need advice. I literally say to myself, and this happened just last week, I need Murray, and I send him an email and say, do you have a minute? So welcome, Murray. I can't wait to get started, hear your insights, and just have a good time talking that we always do.
We always do. Yeah. Well, thank you, Erica. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity. And I think you're doing a real service to folks in identifying this, because it's people get so caught up in, following the line, that it just to hear that you don't have to, and that there's ways to strike your own path, is empowering. We need more people to feel that.
Yeah. And I think, and the more I talk to people, when I started this podcast, I was talking to all kinds of people. And, having worked with law firms for 30 years now, I find myself, usually more drawn to people who are, have some kind of involvement with the profession of law.
Right.
And what I'm discovering is that there are a lot more people out there who have the same thought and feel like I want to go into this profession, and there's more than one way to do it. And I feel like it's been very freeing. You, of course, started out as a lawyer. So what my question for you is, what drew you into law? Because I remember when I had already started working at law firms, and then I came to this juncture in my career in working in marketing and business development for some big firms. And I said, what's the next step in my education? And it was either law school or business school. Every lawyer who I knew at that point said, this was the early 90s, said, don't go to law school. What made you say yes to that question? I will go to law school. And also, when did you realize that you were maybe meant for a different path?
Yeah. Well, good question. Like a lot of lawyers who are my age, which is so much older than you, Erica.
Oh yeah, so much older.
We graduated college in a lousy economy. It was terrible. And so a lot of us decided that we would further our education, kind of hoping that, we'd get to the other side of whatever the furtherance of that education would be, and the economy would have rallied, and we'd all be, in wine and roses, right? But it didn't really happen that way. I didn't really ever want to be a lawyer. I enjoyed, and still do, literature, philosophy, logic classes, which really is the perfect background for a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it at the time. I was like, oh, this is cool stuff. I like it. I actually wanted to get my master's degree in peace studies, believe it or not, at University of Colorado, Boulder. So yes, I took a very different path.
Yes.
But I took the LSAT at the strong encouragement of my father's friend who was a senior in-house counsel at Standard Oil at the time. It was known as Standard Oil. And I did pretty well on it. It was all of those logic classes, I think, that helped. So there was a lot of pressure on me, both internally on myself and also from family and friends to say, just try law school. Just give it a try.
What could happen?
The worst that can happen. Well, let me tell you. And I did. So I applied to law school in Chicago. That's where I grew up. And I did my undergraduate in Milwaukee at Marquette. I didn't really like it. The only classes that I enjoyed were con law and criminal procedure. And I was really fascinated with the Fourth Amendment, which few people know or still don't really know that much about, and how eroded those core constitutional rights have been. The Fourth Amendment is around illegal search and seizure, et cetera, arrest, basically keeping the government out of your business, unless they've got business to be in. But that was pretty cool to me. I loved, understanding that, reading that. I always like kind of understanding kind of what's going on under the surface, behind the scenes. Our business, the rules in our country, it's all around the U.S. Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And we're hearing a lot about it today, and a lot of people don't know what the hell they're talking about. Even the people who say that they're experts in the Constitution. But I didn't really like law school. I found it to be anti-academic. I'd come out of a very academic environment. Marquette's Jesuits. I had a lot of Jesuit priests as teachers, and they are extraordinarily talented academics. And so I had a very rich academic undergrad. But I did like the discipline of thinking like a lawyer. And so kind of get back on track here. I then joined the public defender's office, as you said, during the crack epidemic, and I worked there for 8 years. And people say, "Oh my God, you must have been so burned out." I wasn't. I liked it. I liked what I was doing, but I decided I needed to try something different. I knew the corporate law wasn't something I want to do. I didn't want to be, criminal lawyer, because that I had done it, and I also saw friends who went off and did it, and they weren't enjoying life. So there was no single moment that told me that I needed to find a different career path. It's just that I was doing some teaching and writing, doing this when I was at the PD's office. And the only thing I knew was that I wanted to do something that kind of scratched all those itches and let me take those things that I had learned, writing especially, because I spent 5 years as an appellate lawyer. So I was writing 7, 8, 10 hours a day. That's people, well, how do you become a good writer? I'm like, well, write.
Right.
Right. That's all I can tell you is, write and know a modicum of grammar. And that's all you need to know. Right. So that's kind of, my story with law school is that, in some, I wasn't like super excited to go. I wasn't super excited to be there. But when I got up practicing, I enjoyed that. And then I said, this discipline that you get, this thinking like a lawyer, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. That sort of disciplined, elemental thinking serves you well. And this is what I tell people all the time if they think about law school, is that's the value you're going to take from it.
Yeah. But I mean, when I think about you, and probably anybody who talks to you for more than 60 seconds thinks about you as a storyteller. Because you are a story, you have the whole setup, everything. And so, to me, the legal profession isn't always known for embracing creativity. In some ways, yes, but in other ways, no. So how, you've continued your career in the legal profession, albeit from a different angle. So how have you managed to bring storytelling and your way of thinking into this very structured environment?
Yeah. Well, I'll just throw back to the public defender days. I would once in a while go to these conferences for appellate lawyers, and they were usually dreary, awful conferences. But there was one that was focused on storytelling and statement of facts. Every opening brief has to have a statement of facts. In criminal law, it's sometimes like a CSI plot, right? And so that kind of sprung in my mind that storytelling was actually good advocacy, and you could advocate better as a storyteller. And, you know, we, well, the way I sort of get to the storytelling part in law, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about sort of the underlying, what underlies it, but I usually start a conversation with a new partner, somebody I haven't met,
Mhm.
uh, or have spent very little time with. Ask them about the work, what they find professionally engaging and meaningful, and why. You know, don't just let them off the hook by saying, M&A, you know. But guess what? Once you ask that why part, the storytelling starts.
Yeah.
And you know, once you get them telling their story and what they're excited about and what they're engaged in, and you know, time and time again, we find a way to turn that enthusiasm into how we talk to our clients. And the clients will respond to that. They like working with people who are excited about doing what they're doing, and they've got good snippers. They can tell if you're just, you know, if you're pretending you're excited about, you know, doing the due diligence on the IP portfolio for the 30th time. We are humans respond to storytelling.
Yeah.
We have forever. I mean,
It's
since
sticky with us. Like it
it
sticks.
is, it
Yeah.
absolutely sticks, right? And it's something that, you know, it's been going on since before the Bronze Age. I mean, what they did is they sat around, you know, these fires, right, and you know, ate their leg of lamb or whatever the hell they were cooking, right, and would tell stories. And you know, if you really start digging into stories, you know, there's a guy named Joseph Campbell. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all, but
Okay.
Joseph Campbell, great, really interesting sort of anthropological study kind of guy. And he wrote this really cool book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And to be simplistic for the point of, you know, just trying to get through this, um, the book is about the hero myth. And the hero myth is found in every culture,
Yeah.
in whether it's, you know, and all over the world and from all times in history, and every religion has heroes in it. And you know, his idea was that if we really study these hero stories, we will find that there's common themes that run through all of them, and that this is how society regulated itself, by
Mhm.
telling these stories about these heroes. And so, you know, it kind of, again, one of those sort of aha moments, like, okay, yeah, if I want people to listen to me and understand what I'm talking about, I have to tell it to them, you know, in the way of a story. And I wrote some articles about storytelling years and years ago, in legal. And as you know, I do a podcast where we focus on storytelling.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, just to kind of bring it down into something really specific, because I was thinking about this, like, okay, I'm talking about all those highfalutin, you know, Joseph Campbell and blah, 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 you know, but you know, I I still am, you know, a marketing and BD guy at a law firm, right? So you know, I've been doing it forever, right? So I, I have the luxury of being able to sort of sit back and say, "What? How are we going to approach this?" Instead of running around trying to find the eight, you know, the eight engagements that we have to get in the story. That's right. But I worked on this proposal for a client who was a multi-billion dollar family-owned business, big business. The founders were getting older, and the next generation was ready to leave this thriving business and pursue some other interests, which often happens. The second or third generation says, you know, enough. This family built this company from the ground up. They did not inherit money. They did not come from money. You know, it started as a you know, a storefront somewhere, and then they turned it into this amazing business, doing something that most people would find just totally mundane, but they did. They loved it. They became wealthy. Um, and so, you know, the family were a great group of people, and they had really strong emotional investment in the sale of this company. I mean, this was, you know, a complete sea change for their family. You know, they were having to sort of work with dad who founded it, and you know, he was starting to get a little less sharp, so it was hard for him to
Yeah.
understand why anybody would want to sell the business, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I knew that we had the skills and the capacity to do it. We've got a great family office practice here, great private wealth management practice here. But I also knew that there was probably, a dozen other firms in Chicago that were roughly equally suited to do this. I mean, that's the dirty little secret of, law firm marketing is like, there's not that big of difference between some of these big firms, as much people tell you. But so knowing this, we crafted this fairly, standard pitch, with the lists of deals and the lawyer bios. And when we were done, I wanted to tell a story of how we were going to take care of this family during this process. And so I wrote this short 400 word, very well chosen words, about what it was about, why we were the right people to take on this, not just from the technical legal standpoint, but also understanding sort of and having the empathy, business,
the emotional side of it. Yeah,
absolutely. And the lawyers, of course, were totally skeptical. Like, oh, who cares? They need to know that I went to Harvard and I've done 20 of these deals. And I was like, yeah, that's great, but the guy down the street went to Harvard.
They probably feel like they're selling one of their children.
Yeah, exactly.
To make
right. Like that. So the lawyers were very skeptical. But I know if I put the words executive summary on the top page, right, that it would actually get read. And so we sent the materials to the CEO of the company, who wanted to have them before the board made the final choice. This choice of law firm on this was going up to the board, and the board was, some of it was family members, some of it was other advisors. It's a privately held company, so boards are a little different. So we sent it to the CEO, and she sent it back to us with lots of good ideas for us to put in there, fill in some holes, etc. But when she and there was excellent feedback. But when she got to the point about the executive summary, she said, and this is a quote, "Leave it as it is. This will resonate with the owners and the board and the family." Now, I wish I could tell you that, we got the business. I don't know if we got the business. We sent this in last week. So, it takes a little while, but that's the storytelling point. And I, if we get this engagement, I'm not going to say, oh, we got it because of the story that we told. But I have to think that something about sort of the message that we delivered about who we were, what we were, why we understood that this was so important to them, and how we would protect their interests in ways that probably would go above and beyond what a normal corporate transaction would be, because of we understand the family. I mean, there was a whole trust and estate thing that was going on. I mean, it was a big deal for this family and any family, even selling your Subway franchise. I mean,
I think you and I are very similar creatures in this, in that the law is a very mind-driven profession. It's all based on precedent and this is what came before and this is how we're going to do this now. And I feel like you and I both bring a lot of heart to it. And so it's that sense of bringing heart to it that sometimes people don't know what to make of it. But it takes something like the CEO saying, leave this exactly as is, because it's going to speak to somebody. That is not always so easy, like bringing heart to this very mind-driven field. I feel like, you've hit upon something with storytelling and, kind of sneaking it in around the edges a little bit and, calling it an executive summary is brilliant. I'm totally going to steal that if I need to.
Absolutely. Go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
But I do think that even in something as mind-driven as law, that when there is, and it's not going to be the same case for everything. I mean, if you've got a bet the company litigation, it might, like they're going to want to know, have you litigated this in this venue and did you win and where's all of that. But finding those places where you can bring some heart into it, where it's going to be received and will set you apart, I think is I like to see it.
Yeah. Also, so I've been through many rebrands, brand refreshes, all those kinds of things. And I've heard lots of different ideas about brand.
Yeah.
Some of it horseshit, some of it really good, some of it really wise. And maybe the first time I went through a a brand refresh. The consultant that we were working with on that, really great guy, very smart, really understood what he was doing. And he said, the your brand is what is the emotional reaction that clients have to you. And he said it's not emotional like they're crying or they're laughing or they're happy. He said all humans have, no matter how heady they are or how much they're in their head, they still have an emotional reaction. I like these people. These people are smart. These people are looking out for me. I feel safe with them. Or I don't feel safe with them,
Yeah.
or they're jerks, or I don't trust them, right? And he said, so when you're thinking about brand, you're thinking about that promise that you're making to them.
Yeah.
And that promise has to resonate on an emotional level. And if what you're saying about yourself and what your brand is saying doesn't resonate, right? We see this all the time in law firm marketing, right? It's just so same. And it's so, because it's so, people are so afraid to get outside the color, outside the lines, you know, yeah, I love to see it when a firm's willing to color outside the lines.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, I mean, is that what brought you to your current role? Because your current role is, it's a shift for you. You've held a lot of different roles, which is, one of the reasons that I wanted, to get you on, around the ladder. But is that something that is, that you're seeing now in your, what is the senior strategic advisor? What does that do?
I still have to pick up this card and read it because I want to make sure I'm getting it right, because honestly, the sum and substance on this is that I worked at a law firm called Jenner and Block for many years. Great firm. It has recently become almost a household name because of all this business with the executive orders.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised that they did what they did and how they did it. And I'm very happy that they did so. I worked at Jenner. A number of the partners at Jenner spun off, formed the Chicago office for Wilkie Farr and Gallagher. And they've been at it for about 5 years. They've grown the firm tremendously. And around Christmas of last year, I got a call from the person who founded the office and said, "Hey, we're kind of growing to our next step. I need somebody who is going to serve in this kind of all around capacity, who's not going to get hung up on titles or job descriptions or any of that stuff. Just kind of getting your nose into everything, which I love.
That's perfect for you.
It's perfect for me. And I think you and I were talking about the fact that I don't have a job description. I don't have a bogey that I'm of numbers that I'm trying to hit. And I report into one person who has the ability to say yes or no. So, I guess, to like make it kind of a easy to digest. It's all things growth, right? It's continuing, it's maintaining and increasing the velocity of growth at this firm. The partners who founded this part of the firm, have taken it as far as they can while still practicing. So they need somebody who they can trust. They need somebody who can understand what they're doing, somebody who can understand what's important, what's not, what's noise, what's signal, and also to advise them.
Mm-hmm.
To just say, no, don't do that. Usually it's more like, no, so don't. If we're going to spend that money, let's do something where we're actually talking to the clients. How's that?
Yeah. That's a start. That's a good start. I mean,
Exactly.
it occurs to me that for a lot of people, taking a role like this would be, like you look at it and you're like, oh my goodness, this is perfect for me. Other people would look at it and say, it's risky. I don't know, it's different. It's risky. I don't know what it doesn't have a job description. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Looking back now on your career, because you've had so many different twists and turns, what is a risk that you are glad that you took, even if it didn't go quite the way you thought it might?
I have notes on that. So great question. And I think this is one that everybody should be thinking about. And if you haven't done this in your career, then in my view, you're not doing yourself a very good service in your career. Okay? And that is, I told you I was a public defender. And at some point I said, I want to do something else. So I took a hop from the Cook County Public Defender's Office into kind of a boutique consulting firm. And it was incredibly challenging. I was wholly unfamiliar with the corporate world, business travel, understanding how to have a client facing persona. And believe it or not, job was very short term. That's, yeah, but it was a crash course with an emphasis on the word crash, right? In corporate America.
Mhm.
I probably quit about a week before I was going to get fired. Okay. That's kind of where things were at. And honestly, if you haven't been fired at least a couple of times in your career, again,
Yeah.
it's coming. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. But I think that, that was, a risk that I took that didn't turn out how I wanted it to turn out. Looking back, I don't think I really had a plan, for what I wanted to do. And I just figured, well, I'm smart enough. I know enough. I can learn a lot. I can just do this thing. Well, yeah, right. But there's a whole lot more that I need to learn and that I needed to know.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about what I enjoyed doing, what I didn't enjoy doing. I learned that I was the happiest when I was in front of the clients, and I learned I was the most unhappy when I was doing kind of these rote jobs that everybody seemed to want to do.
Mhm.
But the kind of the rote stuff would make me nuts. So there was a lot that I learned from it. It didn't turn out how I planned it, how I wanted it to turn out. Nobody wants to get fired, or sort of get out the door just before you're going to get fired. But it was it did, and everybody needs to experience that. You need to have you should be looking for growth opportunities on every job that you have. And sometimes growth opportunities are thrust upon you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It means that, it's, I don't know. My mom always says, like, you should go into new stuff like this kind of nervous. It should be a little anxiety provoking because, that a little bit of that keeps you on your toes. You don't want it all the time, but you don't want to rest on your laurels either. You do want to be, looking for these growth areas.
Yeah.
And it can make you a little bit nervous because it's new.
Yeah. And that's, coming into the job that I have now, I was a little bit nervous, and I just finished month 3, right? And that's kind of, you should be sitting back and saying, okay, what did I learn? What am I doing?
Yeah.
And I sat down with the person who hired me, and I said, how's it going? What's going on? Is this what you had imagined? He said, way beyond what I imagined. He said, this is great. Just keep on doing it. We're going to get you some staff. So anybody out there who's in Chicago who wants to come work with me, just know I'm a pirate.
Do it. I would say do it because you would have a great time.
Well, have a good, absolutely.
So I have to ask you this. This is switching gears, but I remember writing this question with you in mind. If you could wave a magic wand and redesign the way law firms approach growth, branding, or talent, what would you change first?
You got to change. You got to change some things on the inside first. And some friends of mine did an amazing study that got almost no attention, and it was done for the Illinois Supreme Court committee on the advancement of the profession or some highfalutin thing. But they hired them to study the idea of bullying in the law world,
Oh.
and they talked to thousands of people, and kind of the sad result is that there's still a lot of bullying that's going on in our profession.
I haven't even thought about that. That has not come across my desk.
Yeah. Well, and if you want to drop a link to the report in your show notes, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I will.
Because it's fascinating. The people who did the study very disciplined. They're extraordinary. Sort of they've got, one of them has a background in PhD in psychology. The other one has a background in statistics. So this is very rich, very rigorous,
Yeah.
a very rigorous study. But it, I read it at least as much as I could. It's really long too. But that might be part of the problem. But I think that, there's some things we're going to change inside first before we can change this other stuff. So my magic wand, get rid of this idea that I did it this way or had to go through this stuff, so they have to too, right? That kind of BS. Because the world is different. The way things are today are different than it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I eliminate all bullying at every level, even the kind that is subtle. And this is what this study looks at is the, there's everybody can identify the, partner in the hallway yelling at the paralegal as bullying, but, there's much more subtle forms of bullying.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, zillions of examples of microaggressions, that take place against people all the time.
And they're demeaning, right? Yeah. And they're designed to be controlling, right? They're designed to control the environment around.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm so glad you brought it up that they identified it in the study as bullying, because of course I have been hearing about that, but I haven't used that word. I haven't heard that word used for it. And it is bullying.
It is. And
microaggression sounds, it's a newer word, but at its heart, it's bullying. And it's been going on forever.
If anybody's listening, I will definitely send Erika the link to the report. But also, if you have access to Bloomberg, David Latt, who is a well-known writer in our area, I actually told him he needed to write an article on this, and he did. He wrote a great article on it. So if you have access to Bloomberg, and you can just search up David Latt, it was probably about 6 months ago that wrote the story, and he does a really nice job of sort of bubbling down a 400-page report into something that's really comprehensible. So I also think I wouldn't call somebody an associate until they have at least 3 years in the role. I don't know why we call people associates and put them on this crazy thing we call the partner track. That doesn't make any sense to me. And when you look at the world of consulting, they have, many sort of titles, and it's go before you even get to the point where it would be where we are, where we think of our associates in law firms.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would spend most of my time, most of my dollars in recruiting associates who are third year or above.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there are plenty of firms that do that. I worked with a firm for many years that they do not recruit people out of law school. At the very least, you've had a couple of clerkships, but most of the time you're lateraling over with at least 3 years of experience.
Yeah.
And the downside is that sometimes you have to reteach things to them, but they're getting people with some real world experience.
And I'll tell you what, it's going to be a lot less expensive for the law firms to sort of reteach somebody than to have somebody come in as a newbie and get themselves burn out in 2 years. Right?
Yeah.
That's just very expensive for the firms and not great for the people, and it's just awful. I take all day-to-day decision making about what goes on in a firm out of the hands of the lawyers and all committees. I would allow for non-attorney ownership of law firms. I would do everything I could to create a client-first culture and stick to it. Finally, I would adhere to what every firm says it has, the no asshole rule. I would say that that has to be adhered to, that has to be committed to. And, I don't care if you're the highest unit partner, if you're being an asshole, you either change your ways or take your business someplace else.
Yeah.
Because that toxicity spreads through an entire organization.
Oh, it certainly does.
And negative energy, unfortunately, spreads faster than positive. Right. Yeah. And once that negative energy has taken root, it is so hard to get rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I joined Sidley, I was in the New York office, Chicago-based firm.
Oh yeah.
And one of the firm leaders, probably like the co-chair of the management committee or the vice chair of the management committee at the time, was in New York, and I had met him during my recruitment process. Lovely, lovely person. And I made some offhand joke about like somebody the other day who had been yelling in the hallways. And he was like, "What?" He was so upset. He said, "I don't want that to happen." And he was absolutely sincere. It was not, nothing cynical about it. He was really upset by it. And I was like, wow, I'm in a different kind of firm now.
Yeah, you are. And I like that you brought up Sidley because that's a firm. I don't know what it's like today, right? I think it still has great culture, but it had a phenomenal culture, right?
Yeah.
It was hard work. It was very driven. It was, intense, but they were a client of mine, and I loved my meetings with the partners.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said they were great people, really interesting, and decent.
Yes. I mean, I'm biased. I spent almost 12 years there.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
that Sibley will always be near and dear to my heart.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So it's almost time to wrap up, but I do want to ask you, what unexpected lessons or rewards have come from you going around your own ladder rather than climbing a more traditional one?
Hmm. Well, uh, you know, doing kind of following the path that I followed, if you can even call it a path, it was, it's more like a top, just kind of, straight. But I've been exposed to lots and lots of different kinds of people and lots of different kinds of thinking, from hardcore entrepreneurship to, Sidley, which is a very staid,
Yeah.
very corporatist, very, very disciplined culture. To that firm in New York where, they just kind of whatever they wanted to do, they did, and they did it a great way, and they had fun doing it. And, they had espresso machines in practically every single corner of the office. So you could just get jacked up on espresso all day. But yeah, but, and also, work. And that was by the way, great environment. Wonderful environment. Boy, Tartar Krinsky Droga. Those guys are aces with me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. But I think it's probably sort of the people that I've collected along the way, right? And the hearing the different ideas about brand. I mean, good people who are good at branding are kind of philosophers, right? They really are. A good branding person is a kind of philosopher, the discipline that they're taking into what they're thinking. So I enjoy that. I've had because I can write, because I can express myself well. I've had opportunities to be with people who needed that from me.
Mhm.
So and it's actually not real common. It's not as common in the marketplace as you would think. And when people need it, they need it. And so, I had the chance, when at Jenner, they had the team of attorneys who were working for a guy named Tony Valukas, who was the examiner in the Lehman Brothers holding bankruptcy.
Okay.
So, and he was the examiner, and they wrote this massive examiner's report, and it got enormous amounts of attention. And Tony was being asked to fly all over the place and speak, and getting interviewed by people all over the world because it was very clear if you read the report, or even if you read the first 20 pages of the report, they got to the heart of the matter, what happened at Lehman. And everybody wanted to know, because it felt in many ways like Lehman was part of when the bottom dropped out.
Yeah.
Right? When Lehman went down, they weren't maybe that they were the only thing that caused the world market to go down, but they sure did make it go faster.
Yeah.
And they sure did make some decisions that weren't great. So I had a chance. I spent a year traveling around the country with Tony, going to all these conferences, helping him, rewrite. He had a kind of stump speech, rewriting the stump speech for every one of the audiences that we were going to be in front of, and having some amazing experiences along the way. I mean, one of the most incredible was he was asked to speak at the Harvard Club in New York like the starchiest place on the planet, right? The Harvard Club in New York to by the magazine Institutional Investor to a room full of institutional investors. We received the attendee list, and about a third of the people who were in there who were going to be attending were Lehman people, former Lehman people. And Tony was pretty direct and pretty, I wouldn't say harsh, but he was certainly, he certainly was saying, hey, there are some people who violated fiduciary duties. There are people who did not adhere to the kind of risk management that they should have. And it went all the way through the organization. And these are the kind of people who were all the way through the organization who were there. And he didn't change his tune one bit in his presentation. And he and I were both sitting there afterwards because we both talked before. They were like, shit. These people could be real. We could have a hostile crowd. Right? So he finishes, and the Lehman people get to their stand up and start applauding.
Wow.
And at the end, they came over and they sat with us for a few minutes. 3 or 4 of them sat with us for a few minutes. And they said, you said what had to be said. And they said, it wasn't easy for us to hear, but what you said was truth. And I thought, wow, how often are you going to get a chance to see this? I mean, this is like, these are people who are involved in something historic, whether people were happy with it or not, they're involved with something historic. And I just, because of who I am, I got a chance to just sit there and revel in what was going on there. And, listening to this take on history that was unique. So when you say, what are the unexpected lessons and rewards? That's one of them. Right. And, it's all the great people I've met. It's all the cool stuff I'm able to do, being able to spend time with people like you, and you calling me and saying, what do I do with this? I love it. You're not the only one who does it, right? And I love that, right? Because then it lets me take that creative, okay, let's see what you can do. What can we do with this clay?
And
So
advice. So thank you.
absolutely. Well, I hope you took something from this. I hope your folks who are listening at home, keep those cards and letters open. I will definitely give you the link to the bullying report.
Thank you. Yes, I will put that in there. And thank you so much. This was even more fun than I knew it would be. So, and thank you, everybody. That's it for this episode of Around the Ladder. And please remember, there is no one right way up. So take your detours, make your moves, keep carving your own path. And if you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you did, please share it with a friend or a colleague who is maybe on their own unconventional journey. And I hope to see you next time. Murray, thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
My pleasure. Thank you, Eric.